After what has been almost 72 hours at the time of this recording with the iPhone 14 Pro, there's a resounding conclusion that I've come to with my experience of it so far, which is that the iPhone 14 Pro actually resets things for Apple when it comes to the iPhone, just like what the iPhone 10 did about 5 years ago. And that brings some unique user experiences, both good, in between, and bad. Now, I personally do wish that Apple did go with a matte finish for the metal rails, but regardless, when it comes to the fit and finish, the weight of the device and how it feels very familiar to what we've experienced before. The only thing again I wish that Apple did was go with a more ergonomically friendly design, as these edges are still feeling very sharp in the hand. It's still more manageable thanks to the 6.1-inch footprint of the 14 Pro, but nonetheless, in terms of how it feels, the fit and finish, this is a very premium and nice flagship device. Next is the display experience, and let me tell you, there's some things to really get through. On some levels, this is pretty much a tried and tested formula that we've seen before. 6.1 inches, a slightly above 1080p resolution, 120Hz ProMotion display, which has been updated to the second generation LTPO2 panel that can refresh as low as 1 Hz, which only pretty much works in always on display mode, which we're going to talk about some more. The peak brightness of this really goes into different modes: 1000 sustain, 1600 nits when it comes to HDR, as well as peak 2000 nits of brightness when in outdoor situations. Now, there isn't a toggle to enable this, so to benefit from this, you do have to be in auto brightness. But I will say, the situations that I've experienced it, yeah, this is the brightest display that you can definitely get on a smartphone right now, especially at the 6.1-inch form factor. I'm ready to pretty much say this is the best display I've experienced at this size. Things to still note what Apple have done here: the bezels are just a bit slimmer than before, and of course the haptics are still great in terms of the usability, but the real one here that we have to take in consideration is the new generation notch. This is one of the reasons why I say this phone resets things just like what the iPhone 10 did when it introduced its notch. Now, this is called the dynamic island, and I want to preface and say that really and truly, this is the touch bar for the iPhone. It really should have just been called a touch bar because it morphs and changes, and you can physically interact with it just like what you could do with the older touch bars on a MacBook Pro. The dynamic island itself isn't a breakthrough feature that's going to make you want to get the 14 Pro. See it more as a clever, ingenious way of covering up what is a visual interruption, a visual dimple to the display experience, because I'll tell you what, it really does eat into the content that you're watching, so just bear that in mind that based on the positioning, it will take up a bit more space. But what it really does is adds a level of fluidity and a genius to it. Now, this 6.1-inch version of the iPhone 14 Pro makes it much more easier to reach. And the dynamic island is a bit confusing in terms of what apps work in what situation and whatnot. But when you do see it interact, the physics, the fluidity, the animations, it is a really nice touch. And Apple are calling it iconic. Name aside, which I don't agree with, and again, it should have been called the touch bar. This is a very interesting touch in terms of resetting what support is going to be and how it interacts, because it doesn't interact with notifications, but it does with certain first-party apps and settings, as well as third-party apps so far. So far, it's interesting, but this isn't something that is so groundbreaking where I'm like, yes, this is what we've been waiting for. But it does add an interesting visual touch and experience to the display on the iPhone 14 Pro. Last quick roundup is the always on display. Let's rephrase it and recall it and rename it. This is what you call Apple's implementation of a fully on display, or in some cases, an always dim display. Don't get me wrong. I know Apple like to do it the Apple way, right? And it does look cool, as you're seeing how the wallpaper transitions to the lock screen, but this is very distracting. Yes, this is what they've been waiting for when it comes to the LTPO2 generation display, as the 1 Hz is what enables this and is correlated to the brightness of your display as well. But really, this is too bright. It is just too bright and it's just too distracting. And it's quite a shame because a lot of people have been saying this and they've not been used to it, whether you've come from an always on display on an Android device or you've never had it before. It does give you the illusion that your phone is on and it hasn't been locked, which is just a very weird experience. Now, mind you, I've got a very simple solution that I've actually come up with in terms of creating what is a very minimalistic style of an always on display. I created a short, go check it out. But overall, yes, it has it. It's just not what we were expecting. But I will say this, for a 6.1 inch display, this across the board, thanks to the flat panel, is the best display experience I've experienced in this form factor. And hey, if you're enjoying this review so far, then make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you're part of Team TLS, the Tech Lover Squad, so you don't miss any future videos on the channel. With that out of the way, let's continue with the review. For this section, when it comes to the specs and the performance, it's gonna be short and sweet, and it shouldn't be a surprise because Apple are finally using a new chipset in here. Based on a 4nm process, it's the A16 Bionic chip. And it's all about efficiency, refinement, and also, yes, you do still get a performance boost. But really, when it comes to all of it being put together, this is Apple flexing again. They have the best system on a chip on the market. It's just a fact, and it's something that they need to be praised for, and I give them credit because they've kept it year on year. So it's good to see it here. For the performance overall, I'm not much of a mobile gamer to see how it works in terms of the thermal performance, so I'm sure there's gonna be videos online to really show it. But for your day-to-day, and it's a cliche thing for us to keep saying, it is smooth. And because I've fully switched to iOS now, yes, I have fully switched. I've transferred everything, my main messaging app being WhatsApp, my contacts, everything is on here, and this is the first time I've done this since the iPhone 10, even though I've owned the 12 Pro Max, I've owned the XS Max, and I've owned the 13 Pro right now that I'm using with the 13 Pro Max alongside. iOS and the performance with this chipset is smooth and consistent, and the most important thing I'm really experiencing on here that I'm really liking is the efficiency. I think it's safe to say that this section here is probably the biggest area that has reset everything for the iPhone, pretty much taking it far back, even beyond what the 11 Pro did, the iPhone 7 Plus did, and even what the iPhone 10 did. Yes, Apple have finally joined the megapixel race with a new 48 megapixel sensor, an improved 12 megapixel ultra wide, the zoom is pretty much near the same, and an improved selfie with a wider aperture and autofocus. Backed with the fact that you've got the new chipset, ISP, display engine, everything put together, this is Apple's biggest gamble and change yet when it comes to how to approach photography and video. And let me tell you, I'm very surprised in two ways, but regardless, still impressed with the initial results I've seen so far. There should at least be a camera comparison live between the iPhone 14 Pro and 13 Pro, which I highly recommend you take the time and watch. Get your meal, get your popcorn, it's a good one. One thing I will say is that I think Apple's still got a lot of work to do when it comes to fine-tuning this new hardware, because the difference from what we're seeing in terms of the performance from previous in photos isn't as noticeable as you may think. There is a difference, but in more cases that I've tested it, it's quite negligible. Yes, there is more detail. And of course, the fact that you do have Apple's Pro RAW feature where you can use the full 48 megapixels and even still use 12 megapixels is near enough impressive with the DNG files it produces and the flexibility that it gives. But for me, as a video junkie, that is the area that I'm just so impressed with the iPhone 14 Pro. Now, yes, there is enough resolution where Apple could have given us usable 8K. Maybe they're just not ready yet. I was expecting at least to see a good 8K 30 frames a second and 24 frames a second option with 10-bit HDR, no crop, no rolling shutter, and most importantly, class-leading video stabilization. It's just not here yet. But what is here is finally 4K UHD in the cinematic video portrait mode, and there is a 24 frames a second option now, which is only exclusive in the 4K UHD. Thank goodness. And let me tell you, wow, this is a game changer. Some may not see it as so, but for me, video portrait mode is one of my favorite video recording modes, and just seeing it in action, I'm seriously blown away just how good Apple have been able to do it. And just a reminder, you can change the depth of field and the background blur after the fact, really showing the optimization and the processing power that they have under the hood here. I'm lost for words just how impressed I've been with the video. Even looking at things like the stabilization has greatly improved across the board, and that's before you even consider the new action mode, which shoots at 2.8K at 24 frames, 30 frames, and 60 frames a second. Yes, the image will become softer, but let me tell you, against the competition, Apple are just far ahead in what they have in video quality. And when you compare it even to the 13 Pro, it is noticeable even in low light. The software experience has probably been the most controversial and the hardest part of me fully switching to the iPhone 14 Pro as my main device. Don't get me wrong, at the core, it's still iOS with all the limitations I stated before, with the fact that you don't really have that much flexibility to place the icons where you would like. And also just not having true multitasking. It is indeed something I use on a regular basis. But I will say this, with the addition of the lock screen and now the always on display, or the fully on display, or the always dim display, we'll land on that. We'll give it to them. It's the always on display, the customizability with the lock screen changes, how it's more reachable with the notifications from the bottom, and all the additional things together, and just how consistently smooth the animations, the performance, it just does not skip a beat. And its simplicity, the best way I can describe iOS is literally vanilla. It is the most vanilla, organic OS experience that just allows you to do enough without doing it overboard. And I have to admit, I have learned to appreciate and respect what it does, even though for a power user like myself coming from a Fold or Galaxy S22 Ultra, it may be limited in those power features that I'm really used to getting, but I will say the consistency of the performance has been excellent with iOS 16. The battery life experience on this iPhone 14 Pro is one area that has seriously impressed me in this short 3 days using it so far. Let's give a bit of context. Battery capacity for this size, 3,200 mAh battery, and the endurance has been on point. Don't get me wrong, yes, the 14 Pro Max is where the juggernaut battery life experience is, but this, even with the 5G management that I've been using on here with my data, has held up so well that, you know what, I'm confident and I'm glad I stuck to the decision of using this form factor for the iPhone 14 Pro. What even impressed me so much more is during my charging test video, compared to the 13 Pro, this charged at least a good 20 to 25 minutes faster using the 20-watt charging. This is something where I'm surprised Apple have actually allowed more utilization of their charging speeds, meaning this charges under an hour and a half. Not spectacular, don't come at me, I know, but for Apple, this is actually not that bad. More testing is needed with the iPhone 14 Pro, but for now, going back to my original conclusion, this does feel like it's reset things for the iPhone, which brings new experiences that are very interesting, good, in between some problematic areas. But for the next 5 years, I personally think this sets a new precedent for iPhones at the Pro end and probably across the board, which is going to be very interesting to see how that carries out. Have you got the 14 Pro? What are your thoughts and experience? Let me know in the comment section below. That's it for me, Ben from Lover of Tech. If you enjoy videos like this, you know exactly what to do. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're part of Team TLS, the Tech Lover Squad, so you don't miss any future videos on the channel. I hope you're all safe during this time. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.